My name is Danny. If you're on that 415 tour, then I'm your guide through Lincoln's home this afternoon. Let me just give you a bit of background here. On the site, we do have here preserved the only home that Abraham Lincoln ever owned. He lived here for a total of 17 years, between 1844 and 1861, right up until going off to Washington to assume the presidency. So, a very important period of his life we have preserved here. We do consider the house itself to really be one single giant historical artifact. For that reason, there are some things we need to keep in mind once we get over there to keep the house in as good condition as possible so future generations enjoy it as much as we do today. So yes, this is going to be the boring part where I give you the rules. I promise it will not be too bad. Just bear with me for a few minutes of your time. When we get inside the house, we do ask that we do not lean on any of the walls or door frames of the home itself. They are part of the original structure. The house is about 180 years old, so do keep off those walls. If you need to lean on something, in every room on the first floor, at about your hip level, there will be railings between you and Mr. Lincoln's things. You can go ahead and lean on those railings if you want. Grab them, sit on them, elbow on them. There is no historical significance to the railings. Treat them however you want. That being said, once we get up the stairs to the second floor, there will be some rooms where those railings are not there. In those cases, there is just a blue carpeted section running through the rooms. We ask you to stay planted on that blue carpet section at all times. If you step off the blue carpet, it is likely that you will trip a loud alarm sound. Now, the alarm does not mean panic. It doesn't mean you're in trouble. The alarm means check your feet. If they are not on blue carpet, please get back on it. Once you do that, the alarm will deactivate. We will continue on our way. Best of all, I won't even judge you or shame you in front of everyone else. So no worries there. And then, if you are wearing a heavy backpack today, we would ask you to either wear it around to the front or hold it in your hand, just a way of keeping it from banging off those doors and scratching the walls and things. And then, almost done, a couple general things. Food and drink put away, not consumed in the house, lids tight on drinks, food in sealed containers, and cell phones kept on silent, please. Though you can keep your phones and cameras on, because we encourage photography and video in the house. Just be mindful of using flash around others' eyes. And then, of course, when we are inside the house, face coverings must be kept covering nose and mouth. Outside they can be removed, but in the house they must be kept on at all times. And there we go. That's all the rules. Not too bad. Not much to remember. Just basically keep off those walls, stay on that blue carpet, don't bang off the things and scratch them up. And it is 4:15, so if you have a 4:15 ticket, you are going to be with me. Show those tickets to me over here at the door, then we'll be off on our way. If you've got 4:30, you're short.
I have one.
If you're 4:15,
you have one? Man, back. And
thank you.
Back to us, yes. Longer.
So here we are in front of Mr. Lincoln's home. Now, this is the original house, standing where it has stood since it was built back in 1839. Mr. Lincoln and his family moved in several years after that in 1844. He purchased the home for a total of $1,500. Now, when Mr. Lincoln moved in, the house would not have looked as extensive as it does today. Would have only been about half the size. If you can imagine taking that entire second floor, wipe it completely away. Let that roof drop down on top of the first floor. That gives you an idea how it looked when Lincoln moved in. At that time, it is considered a cottage, a single-story home with an attic loft room above. Now, as Mr. Lincoln finds success in town here as a lawyer and a politician, as his family grows in size as well, he can afford to have the house expanded. So in 1856, 12 years after they move in, the second floor is added on top and the house is in its finished state. So in total, the second floor is about 17 years newer than the first floor. You want to keep that in mind inside. You will notice differences between the two floors in things like ceiling heights, sizes of the rooms, styles of the doors and the door frames, etc. But as much as I do love standing out here talking about the house, I am pretty sure you all got tour tickets for the inside look today. So we're going to head in the house now. As soon as we get in the front door, hang a left, fill in the parlor. It is a double long room, fill that to the back, but we'll all get in there and have our first stop there in the parlor. My 415 group with me. In we go. Both sides of the parlor room. Excellent.
Yeah, looks pretty big.
All right. Thank you, folks. No worries. Excellent. We're all in? Great. So, here we are in Mr. Lincoln's home. Now, it is appropriate that we welcome all of you in this room first, because if you had been guests of the Lincoln family in 1860, this is the room where you would have been welcomed as well. This is known as the formal parlor. It is, for lack of a better term, the fancy room, right? This is where you have all your nicest furniture, prettiest display pieces, things to make a good impression on your guests, because this is the room where you would have hosted parties, formal events, social gatherings, important visitors, things like that. So many different uses here for the parlor. That all being said, there is one big thing the parlor room is not for, and that would be family time. So Lincoln's boys, their sons, would not really be allowed in here. In fact, if there was no party happening that day, then these doors would just be kept closed and locked. Those boys kept out. Notorious troublemakers, the Lincoln boys. They would love to get in here, jump on the furniture, throw things on the walls, no doubt accidentally smash some of the nice pottery or the crystals on the candelabras there, right? So great time for those boys, horrible for the parents. Good idea to just resist that temptation to keep those boys out. You can tell, though, the Lincolns did a good job at that because their furniture is still in great condition, and we have so much of it still here today. So all of the black furniture on the dark wood you see here in these rooms, that is black horsehair upholstery, and all of those pieces are original to the Lincoln family. So the rocking chairs, the couches, the chairs under the windows, all of those did belong to the Lincolns. Other original items here in the parlor include the marble top table on the far wall under the mirror. Then kind of behind me on this back wall, we have this kind of spindly shelf unit, this 5-level thing. That is called a whatnot shelf, because you load it up with whatnots, trinkets, and knickknacks there. And then in the back corner over there, we have Mr. Lincoln's bookcase. Pretty impressive piece. It even has lots of his own books still in it. Now, on one occasion, a couple months ago, I actually got lucky enough to read one of Lincoln's own books from out of that bookcase. That is not part of the tour, I just have to brag about it. So please indulge me in that. I won't do it again.
Which book was it?
It was a book called Life of Black Hawk. Black Hawk is the Native American leader. Lincoln himself served in the Black Hawk War as a young man. He did not see combat, but he was familiar with that conflict. He evidently respected Black Hawk quite a bit, so he did have the biography of him in that bookcase there. Pretty neat. Yes, but of course, these rooms are not just important because they are fancy and pretty. They are also where we can trace back some important historic events in Lincoln's life. Now, probably the most significant event that happens in this room happens in the summer of 1860. That is when Mr. Lincoln is approached here in his parlor by a delegation of men who have traveled to Springfield from the Republican National Convention in Chicago. They travel here to find Lincoln and inform him he has been selected as the candidate for his party in that year's presidential election. They say, Mr. Lincoln, we want you to run. We want you to be our man. Will you do it, yes or no? What do we think Lincoln says to that question?
Yes.
Of course he becomes president eventually. He must have said yes. But it might surprise you to learn, when on that day he is first asked, he doesn't say yes. But he doesn't say no either. He kind of comes up with a third option. He says, will you let me think about it? And he does. It takes him a full 3 days to come up with an answer to this question. As we know, the country in this time is on the brink of civil war. Lincoln famously does not want any violence or conflict. He knows he himself is a divisive political figure. He represents the view that slavery will not expand to any new states or territories adding to the Union. As we know, this is an age of westward expansion, new states being added to the Union all the time. The question of the day, should those states be allowed to have slaves if they want them? Lincoln says no. So that invites conflict. Will that happen? He's not sure. He doesn't know. He doesn't know if he wants to risk it. It does take him 3 days to come up with an answer, after which he arrives at the decision that it is a risk worth taking. It's a responsibility he wants. He writes back and accepts that nomination. The rest, as we say, is history. And we say that Mr. Lincoln's formal road to the White House begins right here in this very room, the parlor. The room where Lincoln first learned he can be president. His name's on that ticket if he wants it. So, kind of a turning point in American history, right here in this space. Do we have any questions here in the parlor? Excellent. Well then, we will move right along. I am going to send everyone straight through the dining room, all the way past it to the room with the red wallpaper. The dining room table and chairs are original. Mary Lincoln's cake stand on the far wall, also original. The cake on the stand, not original. Nor edible. But after that, I'll see
The cake stand right there.
So several times. Their last major renovation was actually quite a while ago. It was 1988.
Okay.
That was the last time that they put the sprinklers in and the alarms and the electric lights.
Okay.
That took like a year.
Yeah,
But there's like air conditioning as well. There is there's small renovations kind of happening all the time.
Okay.
We just had like an upstairs room repainted like a couple months ago. So like we're always doing little things.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just trying to preserve it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome.
This room, here we are. This is kind of the opposite of the parlor. Whereas that parlor room was off limits to the boys, it was just for those guests and visitors, this room here is just for family time. We would call this the sitting room. This is what we would call the living room or the family room today. This is where the family can gather at the end of a long day to relax, enjoy each other's company, play games, tell stories, read books, and get some work done as well. So I will set the scene for you here in this room. On a typical evening, you would find Mary, the lady of the house, over on this far right-hand wall. Beneath that big mirror, you can see her original sewing table, where she makes and mends clothing for the family. So most evenings she is to be found there, working hard, or at least trying to work hard while being distracted because there would be a wrestling match going on the floor. Those Lincoln boys love to wrestle each other down here. And when I say the Lincoln boys, this time I don't mean the sons, I mean Abraham Lincoln as well. He will wrestle his boys here on the floor. Mr. Lincoln is a very good wrestler. He is the winner of over 300 wrestling matches. Mr. Lincoln is in the Wrestling Hall of Fame as well. That is true. So, he's a great wrestler. I am sure his sons were no match for him. We can only hope that being a good dad, he might have let them have a win every once in a while. But if those boys did not want to be so physically active down here on the floor, they could enjoy some other kinds of games and activities over at the red and black tablecloth table there that you see. They play board games like chess, or if they want to be more technologically advanced, they'd use that funny-looking wooden box contraption there. Looks like it's got a pair of goggles on it. That is an original piece as well. Mr. Lincoln purchased that item for about $25. That is not cheap. That is about $900 in today's money. What could be so expensive? Well, it is the high-tech entertainment center of the family, a wonder of the modern age. It's called a stereoscope. The way it works is you open up the top. Inside are slots that fit with the cards you see on the table over there. Those cards have double images on them. You slide them in, you look into the eyepieces. The images on those cards will then pop out at you in 3D. Everybody act very impressed. Wow, very cool, big deal, right? Remember, this is the age before film. There is no TV, no movies. Even photography is new. So the idea of a device that will show you not just a photographic image, a 3D one of far-off places, the pyramids of Egypt, ancient Rome, the Taj Mahal, all these locations visible here using the stereoscope in central Illinois. That's a big deal. That would have made Willie and Tad, the two young Lincoln sons, the envy of every kid in the neighborhood. All of them wanted to play with that. And as I mentioned, that is the original one the Lincolns had, still there on the table. Now, before we leave here, I do want to say, as if this room was not hyperactive enough with all the fun and games and play, there are other family members in this room causing even more chaos. That would be the animal members of the family, because the Lincolns are pet owners. They have several pets. Now, their most well-known pet is a dog, a yellow Labrador mix. Does anyone know the dog's name? Yeah, it's a very classic name, I'll give you that. It is Fido. Good old Fido. Yes, that's really his name. He runs around here playing with the boys, playing with the family, chasing cats as well. There are any number of cats in the house on any day. Mr. Lincoln loves cats. He is a cat person. He picks up stray cats off the street on his way home from work, carries them into the house, and deposits them here on the floor. Mary Lincoln is on record as saying her husband's greatest hobby and passion in the world is the collection of cats. So, there you have it. There are two things I want you to remember about Lincoln if you learn nothing else today. Remember, he was a great wrestler and a great cat lover. Both equally true. Little known facts. Any questions here in the sitting room?
These sketches, are they contemporary?
The drawings here?
Yep.
Yeah, those are actually from 1861. Basically, an artist came to the house after Lincoln was elected president and sketched his rooms as they looked on that day. They were then published in a national newspaper. So they are really the only eyewitness drawing accounts of any interior spaces of the home. They are primary sources we can use to recreate how the rooms looked. And it is pretty neat to be able to see the original pieces in these drawings and see them still here in the room. Like the sewing table there, the mirror there is the same one, the game table, and the candlesticks, all the same ones that are in the drawings.
That's the same mirror you said?
Yes, yeah, it is.
Wow.
Oh,
you can see it's smudged in there, so yeah, it is the genuine article that you see drawn here. Pretty neat.
Were those sketches found here, or did they publish them?
They were published in a national newspaper. So they're published nationally. So they're basically the first exposure most people in the country have to what Lincoln's home looked like. There's actually kind of a misconception in the country at that time that he was living still in a log cabin. So this is to show, no, he has a nice house, actually.
Wow.
Yeah. So, we are going to move upstairs next. I'm going to lead the way. Before we head up, just a few things. Do use the hand railing on the stairs for safety. The steps are steep, but also because the hand railing is an original piece, one of the only original items we want you to touch. It is as close as you are going to get to a handshake with Mr. Lincoln. He held the same railing. Once we get to the top of the stairs, on your left will be the guest bedroom. It's got green and white wallpaper. Poke your head in there, then meet me across the hall back in the master suite. That is where we will continue our tour. Upstairs we go. If you're as tall as Mr. Lincoln, do mind your head. There's a little bit of a clearance issue right here.
Your bedroom?
That's nice.
Hold on, wait your turn.
Go.
Oh, wow, look at the height difference.
Yeah. So this is the addition part, right?
Henry Clay, Daniel Webster. Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, file on in, make sure we leave room for everybody else. Great. All right, so at the top of the stairs there, I hope we all saw that guest room across the hallway. That is really just what it sounds like, the room to host your guests when they stay over for the night. You want your guests extra cozy and comfy, so the guest room actually does have the best bed in the house. You want those guests impressed with their accommodations. You give them the nicest bed. I think times have changed a bit since then. Usually if I stay over at a friend's place, I will end up on an air mattress on the floor if I'm that lucky. But here the guests do get the best treatment. So that's the guest room over there across the hall. But this room, where we find ourselves right now, this is the Lincoln's master bedroom suite. This is Abraham and Mary's room. Or it is actually two rooms. Being a suite, it does extend back behind me as well to a secondary bedroom. Now we call this back room here Mary's room, but that does not mean that they slept apart or that Mary was in here and Abe up here all the time. It just means Mary uses this space primarily whenever the need arises for various purposes. Just for one example, she will look after her sons back here. Willie and Tad also sleep in this back room on what is called a trundle bed. It would have pulled out from underneath the main bed. So Mary can go back there and look after those sons if they need extra attention. She can be back there. That also leaves Abraham free up here to work late. He likes to use his bedroom as an office late at night. He will work from that tiny desk over there in the far corner. One of my favorite artifacts in the house. That is Lincoln's original writing desk. One of the very first items he actually purchased with his own money here in Springfield. He did carry that desk with him all his years here. He loved that desk very much, despite its small size. He writes letters, speeches, correspondences there, all manner of things. If anyone knows the House Divided speech, one of Lincoln's more famous speeches, a house divided against itself cannot stand. We do believe that speech was written at that desk here in the house.
That's awesome.
Pretty cool, right? So, very important piece there. Lincoln will work up until 2 or 3 in the morning some nights. Neighbors will see candlelight in these upstairs corner windows. So he can work late there. Mary and the boys get a good night's sleep back here. No one gets in anybody's way. It is a nice benefit to the addition of the second floor. Let the family spread out, have all that extra room to use. Pretty nice. Now, as much as I do love that desk, I don't know if it was necessarily the first thing you all noticed in this room. I think the most eye-catching feature of the bedroom is all around us. What do we think of this wallpaper? Pretty wacky, right? Pretty busy. I think that's the word I hear more than any other. Busy. It is elegant too. I think if you look up close, especially, it has an appeal to it. But when it does fill the entire room, it can be a bit overwhelming. I agree. But whatever you may think of it personally, this is the only room in the house where we are certain of exactly what the wallpaper was when the Lincolns were here. In most of the house, the wallpaper has not survived, and here a scrap of the original did. We used that scrap to identify the entire pattern, recreated it, put it back here in the room, just as it looked for the Lincolns in their day. So yes, they would have seen this waking up in the morning, going to bed at night. Personally, I don't know how well I would have gotten a good night's sleep in here, but again, that's just me. Times and styles and tastes, they do change over the years. Pretty cool though. Last thing I like pointing out here in the bedroom is hanging beside me on the wall, we have Mr. Lincoln's shaving mirror. Hung at a nice convenient height for a 6'4" gentleman to shave his face in the mornings. Mr. Lincoln, I'm sure when we all picture him, he has that nice full beard, right? But for the majority of his life, he does not have that beard. He is clean shaven. It is not until 1860 that Lincoln finally starts to grow that beard, the last year he lives here. We believe he grew the beard because of a letter he received in the mail from an unlikely source with some advice for how he can win the campaign. That unlikely source is an 11-year-old girl named Grace Bedell. She writes to Lincoln a fan letter saying how she thinks he can win. She says, Mr. Lincoln, you need to let your whiskers grow out because if you had a beard, then all the ladies would notice and they'd be so impressed they would all tease their husbands until they voted for you. So that's her advice. Mr. Lincoln does take the time to write back to her. He says thank you. He says he will consider it, even though he thought he might look silly with a beard, never having had one before. But then, what do you know? Shortly after receiving that letter, he starts to grow it out, and then by the time he goes to the White House, he has that nice Lincoln beard. I love that story, and I like telling it right here at the mirror. This is probably the very place that Lincoln was standing one morning, looking in that mirror, when he decided not to trim the stubble today, just to let it keep on growing, and then the Lincoln beard becomes so iconic today. Pretty cool. Any questions here in the bedroom?
No.
Wonderful. Well then, we're going to move through Mary's room next. As we do, I want to say a couple things before we head through there. The bureau or dresser to the left of Mary's bed is the oldest original item in the house. It is a Todd family heirloom brought up here from Lexington, Kentucky, so that is very old there. And also, Mary would be absolutely thrilled that hundreds of people every day get to walk through her room and admire her toilet. But we do have Mary's original commode on display. Only the best here at the Lincoln home, right? It is to the left as you walk in. She gets a nice fancy wooden seat. Compare it to the pot under Mr. Lincoln's bed. You might need to crouch down to see it, but you will see that Mary gets the good stuff compared to that, right? So, do come through her room, then fill up this back hallway. We will continue our tour back there.
Oh my goodness. You want to go back on that?
So this is the room.
The hallway, we'll tell you all about these rooms as soon as everyone is here in the hall.
What did they do to wake up on time in the morning?
Oh, that's a good question.
Rooster.
No alarm clocks. Rooster. Yeah. Having young
That's
boys,
a good one.
Having young boys, I would think they probably got mom and dad up looking for breakfast, right? Here in this room, I think we will first notice that all of that fancy wallpaper has suddenly gone away. It is nice and basic up here. That is because this is a utility space for use by the family, not for a guest of the home to ever see. You'll notice there is no direct way up to this hallway from the front door, unless you come through mom and dad's room or up the back stairs from the kitchen. So, this is more of a hidden space for the family's use. You don't need to make it fancy or to draw attention to itself. On top of that, I am sure the Lincolns blew a ton of their decoration budget on all that fancy wallpaper, so here you can save some. It's just a simple whitewash on these walls. But that does not mean the rooms coming off the hall are unimportant. On the contrary, we will talk about their importance right now. This first room here on my right, that's your left if you're down the hall looking at me, that's known as the boys' room. Originally, that belongs to Robert Lincoln. Robert is the oldest son, the firstborn. He gets his own room, while Willie and Tad, as I mentioned, slept on the trundle bed in mom and dad's room. But Robert, being the oldest, eventually he gets to leave home. Robert goes to college, leaving his room empty. At that point, Willie and Tad see an opportunity. They're kind of sick and tired of sharing a bed in mom's room, so they run across this hallway and claim that room the same day Robert leaves. When he comes home, Robert finds he's been kicked out, but don't worry about him too much. He got the guest room instead. So Robert got the nice bed out of it, and Willie and Tad get this room. That room is full of toys that you would have played with in the era. You can see ball and cup games, hoop and stick games, checkers and toy soldiers. There's marbles and blocks and dominoes, plenty for them to enjoy themselves with, and also to distract them from getting up to even more trouble than they were already getting up to. As I mentioned, they are a handful. They love causing problems, getting up to mischief, playing pranks. It is a full-time job to keep a handle on those boys. On top of all the duties of taking care of the entire house, that adds up to a lot of work. Now, thankfully, the Lincoln parents don't have to do all of it on their own. They have a bit of extra help around here. That help comes in the form of someone that we call the hired girl. The hired girl is kind of the unsung hero of the Lincoln home. She helps out with cooking, cleaning, taking care of the boys, and she would do glamorous tasks like emptying all of the chamber pots. Somebody has to do that, right? Thankfully, she is paid for her work, and she is given a room in the house free of charge to stay in. That is her room at the end of the hall on the left. So, Many different hired girls here over the years, only ever 1 year at a time, but many of them are immigrants from places like Ireland, Portugal, Germany. We know of an African-American woman worked here as well, and their ages would range anywhere from teenagers to women in their 60s. So a wide variety of ladies. You will see when you get a look in that room, it's a bit smaller than the rest of the bedrooms, kind of basic by comparison. Not much furniture, simple decorations. Kind of reminds me of a college dorm room, I think, in terms of shape and style. And then, finally, if anyone is curious about what's behind the closed doors at either end of the hall, are we hiding anything from you? Nothing really interesting, I promise. Behind this door is almost nothing. It only goes back about half a foot. That is because this door is a leftover from the original layout of the house. Where we are standing right now is about where the attic loft was when this was a single-story home with just the attic room above. So the stairs from the front actually used to lead right up here, and that's what the door is for. But when the whole second floor is built around us, those stairs are twisted around, and behind this door it is sealed off if you like a half foot back. It is just a blank wall back there. Frankly, I don't know why they kept the door. They could have just made it a blank wall. I'm not the Lincolns. I don't know why. And that door down there leads to a little room called a trunk room. It is basically a storage room. In the summertime, you pack away all the heavy winter coats and clothes you don't need anymore into trunks or big suitcases. You store those trunks in that room. It is the trunk room. So half storage room, half walk-in closet. Kind of both. Any questions up here? Yes?
What do the windows up there, do those serve a purpose?
They do. They're called transoms. Basically, no air conditioning in the house,
okay.
So that is how you serve it. Basically, you can have the door closed, but if you have that open, there is still air circulating through the whole house. It keeps the rooms a bit cooler, a bit fresh, not too stuffy. Also probably helps for smoke from like candles and all that stuff. You don't want to fill the room too much by. So, there we go. Yeah, definitely a good question. They are practical as well as pretty. Nicely done. All right, so as soon as we see the boys' room and the hired girls' room, we are going to head down those back stairs and we will all meet back up down in the kitchen.
Where's the sink?
Where's the dishwasher?
Where's the dishwasher?
Yeah, it looks like it. Hey, you can ask him if they made it.
Our folks in the Lincoln's kitchen. Now, it is a bit more cramped than a modern kitchen, lacking some of the appliances we would expect to see today. There is no fridge, no microwave, no running water or electricity at all. Now that makes cooking a bit more difficult than we find it today, especially when you consider for most of the years they lived here, the Lincolns would have done all their cooking just over an open fire. Would have been that basic. But by 1860, Abraham realizes they can do better. He decides to get an upgrade for the family. That upgrade is what you see still here on the floor of the kitchen today. That is the original cast iron wood-burning cook stove. Wow. Quite a hefty, impressive piece, is it not? And it does have many uses. You can see it has that stove top. It has an oven on the inside for baking, and it has what we call the apron. That's the part that hangs over the front. You can use that to heat up plates of food and also to heat irons for your clothes. Really, it is a multi-purpose tool. Now, Mary and the hired girl use this stove every single day. Mary, in particular, loves the stove. She loves the stove so much, when it comes time to move to Washington, she wants to take the stove with them. Abraham has to convince her that the White House has a fully stocked kitchen already. They don't need our stove. We can leave it here. I do not blame him for that. I would not want to even try moving that thing. It does weigh about 600 pounds. Imagine hauling it halfway across the country and showing up with it first day at the White House. No thanks. But you can see many of the foods they made with it are very recognizable and tasty looking to us still today. On the stove itself, we see bacon, pancakes, and biscuits. Over on the kitchen table around the corner, there is fresh bread and fish, vegetables, and eggs. And then back in the dining room, which we are now on the other side of, we walked through that room towards the beginning of the tour. We saw a ham on display. We also saw Mary Lincoln's specialty on her cake stand. That is her white almond cake she makes for Abraham on his birthdays. He loves that cake very much. All of these foods made much easier and no doubt tastier with the help of the stove here. Now that you've seen that, the next thing I want you to focus on is not any one thing in the room, it is the kitchen room itself. I want you to see how big this room is between the four walls of the kitchen space. Now that's important to know, because as it turns out, this kitchen is the same size as the entire log cabin where Mr. Lincoln was born, where he lived as a young boy with up to 8 other people at the same time. Now that is a humble beginning, to say the least, right? Mr. Lincoln has less than a year of formal school in his life. Growing up in those woods of Kentucky and Indiana, had to teach himself to read. When he grows up, teaches himself law practice as well. No law school for Lincoln. He is self-taught. moves here to the state capital to make a name for himself as a lawyer. Thankfully, he does get that career off the ground here, but more than that, he also finds a welcoming community and a family here in Springfield as well. All of that allows him to call this place home for longer than he has lived anywhere else or ever will. 24 years of his life in Springfield, 17 of those years right in this very house. This is really the place where Lincoln grows into the man he was meant to be. As he himself says, when leaving Springfield for good, he addresses a crowd that had come to see him off, and he tells them, "To this place and the kindness of these people, I owe everything." So, that is why still today, we call our entire historic site the Lincoln home. Not just the house, the whole neighborhood, the whole community, that was all home to Lincoln. And we do hope that bringing you through the home today has given you a deeper appreciation for Mr. Lincoln and his family. We want you to see Mr. Lincoln on more of a human scale here, not just the mythic American icon, the big face on Mount Rushmore, the $5 bill, the Lincoln Memorial. More than that, here you can see the man behind it all. The dedicated man, driven man. Here in town he was a hard worker. Here he became a husband and a father. And of course, here he was two other things to never forget: a wrestler and a cat lover, among so much else, right? So with that, folks, that does bring us to the formal end of our tour of Lincoln's home today. It's been a pleasure to bring you all through. It's been a great group this afternoon. On behalf of the National Park Service, let me say thank you once again for choosing to visit Lincoln's home today. It's been a pleasure. We're going to head out this back door here. It's the backyard. You can explore around, stay a while, come see us again anytime. Tours are always, go ahead and turn that knob if you want. Tours are always free here at the Lincoln home. In the backyard, you can see the water pumps, the outhouse, the carriage house, and it looks like we have some special visitors here on the bench as well if you'd like to get to know them as well. Right up. Yes.
All that food in there?
It looks really real, but no, it is fake.
That's the outhouse. We saw that earlier.
Can I take a picture?
Oh, that's good.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Do you want to go check out the backyard?
I'll pay for the carpet. I didn't know what